This is the Crazy Over 40s Live podcast, where every Thursday you will have a pirouette of rotating co-hosts, including myself, Caroline Brown, that will delve into topics relating to the over 40s. For aware of this notion that you're going through a midlife crisis, we're going for a crazy over 40s life. It's the time to uncover and rebirth our adolescent years filled with curiosity and all our desires. We do it right here on the Crazy Over 40s Live podcast. We look into relationships, emotional, sexual, financial wellness, entrepreneurships, providing you with an enjoyable delivery every Thursday. And don't forget to share and subscribe so you can keep updated on all the episodes as and when they become available. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Crazy Over 40s Live listeners. How are you? I'm your host, Caroline Brown. And a hello again to all my loyal listeners. Thank you for returning and showing much love and appreciation. And for those who've just joined, hello, where have you been? I have missed you. We all have missed you. Thank you for joining. And like always, I want to know how you feel. I want to know what you would like me to cover. So please leave a message, review. Leave a review. Let me know how you feel about this podcast. And if there are changes to be made, I will do my best to make those changes as long as they're at the forefront of the positivity of the over 40s. One of the things that I want to cover is brain fog. I have been going through this very recently, and it's one of the things that people do say that really frustrates them during the perimenopausal stage in their life. Now, the perimenopause is the stage just before the menstrual cycle stops entirely. So that's where the challenges come, because you're not going through the menopause stage yet, but there are subtle changes that happen. And cognition, concentration are some of the things that frustrates people when they're going through the perimenopausal stages. Other things can cause memory loss during the perimenopausal stages, such as medication. When we get a little maturer, we have certain health conditions we didn't have in the under 40s. So that can, obviously, the combination of medication can cause forgetfulness or confusion. Emotional disorders, stress, anxiety, or depression can cause forgetfulness, confusion, or difficulty in concentrating. Addiction. Those who are prone to use addictive behaviors to lessen some of the stresses. Alcoholism is one of them. Sometimes that can impact our mental abilities. Deficiency in vitamins also can have an impact in maintaining healthy nerve cells and red blood cells that can cause memory problems. Sleep deprivation can cause memory loss as well. All these things are very worrying. And one of the things that people may already know about is things like Alzheimer's, dementia. These are the things that perhaps may be of great concern for those who have a history in their family of people who have succumbed to dementia or, Alzheimer's. So when we talk about memory loss, what can we do about it? Can you actually reverse the signs of memory loss? Well, Alison Liu is a brain health coach and an expert in helping people get their brain younger and healthier and stronger. I mean, she has struggled with this herself in her late 40s and forgetting what she was saying at times in the middle of saying it, feeling increasingly irritable and struggling with panic attacks. She said that she felt she was losing her sense of self. And now she has adopted a science-based approach, which she said is very helpful, not only to her, but to her client. This has increased her own brain reserves, she says, improving her memory and mood and relationships. She now coaches clients around the world through a personalized plan to prevent or at least slow down the cognitive decline so they can remain present with those they love. Her mission is staying sharp for life. Alison Liu is here after the interlude. And don't forget to share and subscribe so you can keep updated on this episode and other episodes as well. I shall be back after the interlude. Listeners, as I said to you before, we are going to be joined by Alison, and Alison's going to tell us a little bit more about memory loss. Now, we can associate it with aging, but it's a little bit more than that. And she's going to tell us how we can reverse or lessen some of the symptoms of memory loss. So here she is. Alison, how are you?
Oh, hi, Caroline, and all your listeners. Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. And thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today.
I'm really happy to have you on because the over 40s, we do have a lot of things that come our way, and memory loss, I am not immune to that either. It's happening to me a little bit, and I can contribute it to, I'm a woman of a particular age, and yes, the perimenopause is about. So one of the things that I would like to talk about is a little bit about that too, actually. At what stage in your life can memory loss happen? But tell my listeners a little bit more about you.
Yeah, sure. So I love talking about healthy brain aging. It's something I'm really passionate about. And to be honest, when I was younger, I never really thought about my brain. So we hear a lot of things about how we can look after our skin or how we could look after our heart, but not so much about our brain. And so my personal journey really only started about 10 years ago when I noticed too, as I was going through the perimenopause and menopause, I noticed some changes in my own mental health that were really unnerving. So I found that I would frequently forget what I was saying right in the middle of actually saying it and struggle to express myself sometimes or put my thoughts together. So I found that I was making impulsive decisions. That, to be honest, were at times really dangerous. And I was becoming increasingly anxious and irritable, which was very unlike me. So I'd have no recollection of certain meetings or decisions that had been made at work. And I was honestly fearful that my capability, would start to be questioned. So I was really frightened, to be honest, for my mental well-being. And so I started to read and research all that I could. And there was so much information out there, and I didn't really know what I could trust, what would make me better or what could make me worse. And so looking back, I am really deeply grateful that I came across a wealth of science-backed information from functional medicine doctors like Dr. Mark Hyman, Dr. Daniel Amen, Dr. Libby Weaver and others that literally ended up changing my life. So it took me a few years of learning, but now my brain fog has gone and my thinking is clearer and sharper, honestly, than it has been for years. So my focus, my mood, and my memory have all improved, and I'm back to solving problems quickly and adding real value at work. So I'm genuinely happier and calmer. There were times I was having panic attacks. Well, I don't have those anymore. And I know that this has all affected my relationships as well with those closest to me because I'm not as irritable as I was getting. So basically that led me to want to help others because I was kind of like, wow, this has really changed my life. And so I qualified as a health coach and then further got certified as a brain health coach and a brain health licensed trainer. It was the area of health that was just like really interested me. I think as well because I was getting migraines again, as I was going through that menopausal change, I started to get migraines more. And so looking after my brain then became something that was really important to me. There's nothing quite focuses the mind, is there, than pain? And so that was my journey and how I got started. And it's something I hear a lot about, for women going through the perimenopause and menopause, where we can really struggle with brain fog. We have changes in hormones, and just lots of things happening even in our lives. It's that crunch time in life, isn't it, where children are growing up and they're going to university, and there's that whole change, but also parents are getting older. And And so the stress of that as well, I think, takes its toll on our brain health.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for explaining that. And you've explained what is a certified brain coach. What does that, I know you spoke about those who are leading the way in functional medicine. So can you explain a little bit about that? What does it actually involve?
Yeah. So, they actually we know that about 80% of disease is down to dietary and lifestyle factors and environmental factors. That means 80% of all disease, including dementia, actually we can do a massive amount to try to reduce our risk in those areas. So whether it's autoimmune conditions, whether it's heading towards dementia, whatever it is, there's a massive amount that we can do. And so basically, as a certified brain health coach, my job really is to help people, one, become aware of that and give them then tools and things that they can do to slow down that brain aging, and help them to keep their memories and to stay present with those they love for the rest of their life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that brings me on to kind of bigger conversation, really. There's some people who are living into their 90s who are so bright, you wouldn't
Yeah.
think there. So there must be something in what you're saying, and I do truly believe there's a lot that I actually believe in what this whole move to actually try to lessen or decrease the sign of memory loss. How do we know that we are experiencing it? And whether it's like, oh, you just had a hard day, oh, you're just a little bit stressed. Is it actually normal to have a little bit of memory loss?
Yes, well, our brains can tend to shrink a little as we get older.
Okay.
And so, yeah, we may well spot some early warning signs, but I think the really important thing is that we take those warning signs seriously. So there are 6 categories of warning signs. And the first is the one that most people are aware of. It's to do with memory issues. So it's things like noticing that your memory, it might not have been great, but actually it's starting to get worse. Or misplacing things like your keys or finding them in unusual places. Having
Okay.
trouble remembering names or missing appointments. Another classic one is reading from a book or an article and then not being able to remember much of it afterwards, or forgetting to take your medications or supplements, that kind of thing. The next one is having trouble planning and problem solving. Making plans and sticking to them is a really classic sign. Finding it hard to follow a recipe or directions, especially if they're longer, and finding it hard to focus on more complex tasks, and especially those involving maths. So then the third category is having confusion with times and places. So maybe having trouble driving to a familiar location, or getting easily confused or out of sorts, getting lost more easily. It's actually one of the reasons that Alzheimer's disease is actually being diagnosed later, is because with GPS devices on our phones or sat navs. So, in the past, when people would get lost finding their way home, they'd go to the doctor because they're like, "Oh my goodness, what's happening?" Whereas now they just ask their phone or they tap into their sat nav and it takes them home. And so that's causing a delay in dementia being diagnosed early on, which is the best time really to take action. And then the fourth category would be struggling with words, which includes kind of having trouble finding the right word, calling things by the wrong name, having difficulty following along in a conversation, or tending to limit conversation because you're finding it harder to engage, and keep repeating yourself is another one. And then the fifth category is kind of worsening judgment. It involves kind of making increasing number of bad decisions or mistakes with finances. It's quite common for those in the early stages of dementia to make poor financial decisions. I know a heartbreaking story of a man, I'll call him Bob, who lost the family home and all savings just a few short years before being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. He's now in a care home, and his sons don't visit him because they're so angry that he left their mum without financial security. But what they're not realizing is that his brain was already deteriorating in those years before. And then, yeah, finally, just social withdrawal. Feeling more isolated from friends, or feeling less interested in things that they once used to find fun and enjoyable, or cutting back at work because maybe not caring so much, or caring less about physical appearance. So those are some real warning signs to take seriously, and to seek help and to start doing something about. Yeah.
I mean, so heartbreaking to hear that of this gentleman who, it's quite obvious over time, you know, his symptoms had worsened. Okay. And so what you're saying is the impact is enormous. You know, it's obviously impacted not only his finances, but the ripple effect of that, losing the family home, social intimate relationships. It's tremendous. What do you say for people who take this quite lightly? Because it's obvious it's a bigger problem than I initially thought. If people are going through the stages of life, there are some things we just can't avoid. And therefore, the impact it has on us is one of them is obviously what you said, is memory loss. But these are factors, things that we can actually work with. But still, it doesn't take away the pain of it all, isn't it? The understanding of it all. What do you say about that?
Yeah. So when our memory is damaged, the cost can be really high. So it can rob us of our ability to make good decisions, because we forget what we've learned throughout life, and it can really disconnect us from those that we love. It can steal our independence. So, you know, like this guy, Bob, that I was talking about, he now is in a care home because he needs that level of care now. And it makes us vulnerable as well to people kind of taking advantage of us. It can change our personality and can be really frightening to feel like we're losing our sense of self. And so many people in the early stages of memory loss really try to ignore it or hide it or make light of what they're noticing. So, you know, we've got a common saying in the UK, or, you know, I'd forget my head if it wasn't screwed on.
Yeah.
Or, you know, there's this quote by Norman Wisdom, and he says, as you get older, three things happen. The first is your memory goes, and I can't remember the other two. And, you know, and it's funny because we can all relate to that. But actually, it is just being, it's really important to take those early warning signs seriously. And to do something about it. The interesting thing is that studies have shown again and again that we're never too young or too old to start taking care of our brain, that no matter what age we are, we can improve it and we can make it better than it could be functioning right now. And but the important thing is to be intentional and to take action.
Right. And to remove some of the embarrassment, I would think, when someone's going through memory loss, or the impact it has on their self-esteem, isn't it? If you're thinking about the example that you gave, you know, with women going through menopause or the perimenopause, any stage during menopausal stage, it does knock the confidence. The confidence is something
Mm,
that you should know. You should know these things. And why can't you remember things? Particularly women who are in certain jobs where it's expected, it's quite high. You need to be high functioning in many ways. And memory loss doesn't serve them well in those situations, or
mm,
memory fog. Um,
yeah.
can you see the reluctance of people coming forward in those situations?
Absolutely, because yes, it is, one, it's frightening, certainly to admit it to yourself, and two, just like me, you don't want to have your capability questioned, and a lot of people struggle to face that, the fear that there could be deterioration going on in their brain. But like you said right at the start, memory loss problems can actually be common at most stages of life, and they can affect our ability to work and learn, and as well as on our relationships and self-esteem. You're absolutely right. And when someone is struggling with memory loss, they're not as well intentionally trying to be difficult or irritable or willfully making poor decisions. Those are symptoms of a deeper problem. And so, like I said before, it's really important not to ignore the early warning signs. There's so much you can do to slow down and reverse brain aging, but it's essential to take action. So, what I would say is take some intentional steps. It's also actually really important for your listeners to understand. Dementia can start in the brain decades before a diagnosis.
Yeah.
We can see this on brain scan images. Even for somebody as early as in their 30s, you can start to see the early signs of cognitive decline. So, like I say, it's never too early or too late to start taking care of your brain. And there are 5 things I would recommend everyone to do. Would it be helpful if I just go through those?
I was going to ask you that. No, this is a good time. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I would recommend is to assess your brain regularly by taking a cognitive assessment, especially for somebody who might have Alzheimer's or dementia in their family. I would recommend starting as early as 40 and then taking that assessment every year. One, it kind of gives a baseline of where they're at right now, and also can help to improve early detection of trouble by actually more than 9 times. So when you have a baseline, then you can track your progress, and also it can act as a motivator as well. So I take a cognitive assessment regularly, and then I can do exercises to improve my cognitive function. You know, it's so exciting to watch your scores go up, and it kind of really feels again very empowering. So that's the first one that I would recommend. The next is that I think it's really important that people know their important health numbers and get them into the optimal range. So, for example, if somebody's body mass index is too high or too low, then maybe it's time to get serious about their weight. Or if their vitamin D index is too low, then making every effort to get some sunshine and take a supplement if you need to. So I always encourage my clients, whenever they have a blood test, then to ask their doctor for a printout or a copy of their blood test results, and to be actively engaged in their health. So the third
Can I
is,
go on a little
mm,
comparison? Can I expand on that a little bit?
yeah,
What are
absolutely.
the kind of things that raises concern in terms of your blood tests? What are the things that the markers possibly that you need to be concerned about in terms of memory loss? Hmm.
One of the number one predictor on scans of future memory problems actually is low blood flow to the brain. And so uh, blood pressure readings, if your blood pressure is too high or too low, you're actually not getting the right amount of blood flow to the brain. And also looking after the arteries. So if your arteries are starting to harden, and you've got cholesterol buildup, again, that's going to be impacting on blood flow to the brain. So you want to be aware of things like blood sugar levels, cholesterol levels, especially LDL cholesterol, the harmful version of cholesterol, and then blood pressure. So that's an example of the kind of things to look for. Something else would be iron stores, because iron can impact on the thyroid function. And again, the thyroid is involved in metabolism. And so if the thyroid is underactive, then several processes in the body start to kind of slow down a bit. So digestion can slow down and be sluggish, heart rate can slow down, but actually the brain starts to slow down as well. So making sure that you have that your thyroid is functioning optimally is another really important one to look for. Let me think what else there is.
Yeah, because you spoke about a third, did you?
I spoke of, sorry?
No, you spoke about the third. You was going to go on to talk about the...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the third is to know and treat and eliminate some of the risks. So there's no one single path to something like dementia, but rather there are 11 factors that increase your risk. And so, like I've mentioned, with blood flow to the brain, by getting your blood pressure into the normal range, you can reduce one of those risks, and it puts you then in a better place. So research has shown that even if you have certain genes that increase your risk for dementia, how you live can either switch those genes on or switch them off. So once you know the factors that increase your personal risk, you can then be empowered to take action to reduce or eliminate those risks. Would you be interested to know what those 11 factors are?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So once I've gone through the 11 factors, there are 2 more steps that I would go to as well. But here are the 11 factors. So we use a mnemonic called Bright Minds to remember what all of the risk factors are. So the first one, B, is for blood flow. As I've mentioned. So R is for retirement and aging. So your brain is like a muscle, and we really need to work it. You either use it or you lose it. And it's why it's so important to keep learning and to keep really challenging your brain. Super, super important. I is for inflammation. Chronic inflammation can affect, obviously, our body. Things like joints can cause things like Crohn's disease, but actually chronic inflammation also can impact on the brain. And so doing whatever we can to reduce the root causes of chronic inflammation will benefit the brain too. And then genetics. So genetics is a risk factor, but like I said, how we live, what we do can either switch our genes on or switch them off. So they often use an analogy of it's like genes load the gun, but actually how we live pulls the trigger. So genetics doesn't necessarily mean that somebody would get dementia. It just increases their risk. And then head trauma. So head trauma can increase the risk of dementia. So doing what we can to try to prevent falls and accidents just by being mindful, not taking unnecessary risks, to protect our brain. In fact, I'm not sure that people are aware, but your brain actually floats inside your skull. It floats in cerebrospinal fluid. But what that means is that when you have an accident, let's say it's a car accident or a bicycle accident, what happens is the brain then can move inside the skull, and it can, kind of shunt forward and backwards in the skull. But the skull itself has got some razor sharp edges right around the the temporal lobes kind of behind the eyes. It's got some really sharp edges, and so what that can do is it can damage the brain a little bit and cause scar tissue. And so, yeah, being super mindful. Helmets are really helpful for preventing what's it called? Cracks in the skull. But what it can't do is stop the brain from moving inside the skull. So there's that one.
You can see the importance of that, Alison, when you
Yeah.
talk about minor head trauma or injury. If you before you have an accident, when some people lose consciousness, isn't it? It's not to be taken lightly at all.
No, exactly. And even for young children, so what they found is that it's not necessarily just the concussion that can be really harmful, but also if there's a repetitive low-grade damage to the brain, so things like heading footballs, or playing rugby, those kind of tackle sports, actually the repeated injury to the brain over time is also really harmful. So that's head trauma. T is for toxins, because actually 80,000 chemicals have been introduced into our environment since the Industrial Revolution, and we have no idea of the impact of the cocktail effect of these chemicals. But also, our bodies have to work really hard to detox from all of them. And so one, kind of looking at where are the exposure to those toxins coming from in our everyday life, trying to reduce that exposure, and also supporting our body's ability to detoxify. Interestingly, for women, it's estimated that on average, a woman can put up to 500 chemicals on their skin a day. And when I heard that, I was just like, surely not. I mean, that sounds ridiculous. But actually, let's have a little think right now about what kind of personal care products can a woman put on her skin in a day that can contribute to those 500 chemicals. Can you think of some of them?
Well, absolutely. From hairspray to moisturizing cream to shower gels to perfume, nail varnish, mascara, you name it, lipstick, blush.
Exactly. Morning cream, night cream. And when you look at the list of contents, as it were, some of those can be really long, have names you don't stand a chance of being able to pronounce. And so, opting for products that are, when they're eco-friendly, if it's good for the environment, actually it's more likely to be better for us as well. And so going for things that are more green and sustainable and, less chemical based actually is really good for us. So that's toxins. And then M is for mental health, because mental health issues can increase the risk of cognitive decline. And so, again, it's about taking them seriously and, making sure to get treated where possible, and to just look after our mental health. Chronic stress has a very damaging effect on the brain in so many ways. And so, doing what we can to reduce those stresses and improve our ability to handle those stresses is really important.
Very important.
I is for immunity and infections. So having something like Lyme disease, or, there are several people who have really struggled after COVID with then having that long COVID brain fog. And so it kind of shows the power that infections can have on our brain. And so doing everything that we can to support our immune system, and looking after that so that it's nice and strong. So it's immunity and infections. N is for neurohormone deficiencies. So like I mentioned before, if the thyroid is too low, then that's going to impact on the brain. You've got things like the balance between estrogen and progesterone. And if there's not enough progesterone, so that a woman has too much estrogen going on in her body, then she's more likely to feel anxious, irritable, and struggle. And so, you know, making sure that those hormones are as balanced as we can get them. So that's neurohormone deficiencies. And then diabetes and obesity. Like I mentioned before, blood sugar can have a really damaging effect on the brain in many ways. So by having high insulin levels, in order to cope with the amount of sugar that we've got in our blood, the amount of glucose, what the body does is it takes that, the insulin takes that sugar and it pops it onto our tummies. And so then when we get that excess tummy fat, it actually becomes metabolically active. I mean, our bodies are just amazing. It really is just amazing. And so it becomes metabolically active. And what it does is it converts healthy testosterone, which women and men have, converts healthy testosterone into the most unhealthy cancer promoting form of estrogen. And so there's the belly fat we have can churn out more estrogen, and that can be therefore increases the risk of the female reproductive cancers, so things like breast cancer, uterine, ovarian cancer. So blood sugar is a really, really important one to kind of get under control. And then the final one is sleep, and making sure to get enough good quality sleep. And I know that can be really challenging for women going through the menopause, but doing whatever we can to have a lovely evening routine that helps us to prepare for sleep. It's very similar to, you know, children, a baby. You know, when we have a baby, we know that we can't just put it in its cot and tell it to go to sleep. It's not going to work. So we have that little routine, you know, of like a bath and, you know, do soothing things, and you read to it and take the lights down, and all of that helps the body helps them to prepare for sleep. And we need the same as well. And so, yeah, so those are the 11 risk factors. And then each person is going to have different combinations of those risk factors. And so, yeah, it's a case then of working with them to kind of go, okay, these are your risk factors. What can we do? How can I support you in order to reduce those risks?
Yeah. Thank you for going through the list with us, because it does explain a lot about memory loss. And some of the things that you mentioned will involve medication, okay?
Yeah.
Would you say a combination of medication can also contribute to forgetfulness or confusion?
Yeah, it certainly can. You know, medications can be really, really important. And I would definitely say don't ever stop taking medications without consulting with a doctor. I want to say that right up front, because, you know, there may be very, very good reasons why you're on them. However, medications can impact on our nutritional status. So they can reduce some of the nutrients in our bodies. So magnesium is a classic one. So I was on esomeprazole for several years because I'd had a duodenal ulcer. But unbeknown to me, being on esomeprazole for those years, actually my magnesium, my B12 and my B6 were all getting depleted. And it was one of those contributing factors to getting panic attacks, because I just didn't have the levels of those nutrients that I needed in my body. And so part of my recovery has been to bring those, back into, again, into the optimal range, so that I'm not now struggling with those panic attacks anymore. Medications can deplete certain nutrients in our bodies.
Yeah, I know that magnesium is quite good for blood pressure, isn't it?
Well, magnesium is known as nature's sedative, and so it has a very calming effect on the body, and it's actually needed for more than 300 biochemical processes. So if you can imagine, if somebody has depleted magnesium levels, that's 300 biochemical processes that are not functioning optimally in the body. And so, magnesium's super important, B vitamins super important. Making sure that you've got adequate levels of those.
Yeah, wonderful. Now, Alison, you've done so much work in this area. Tell my listeners a little bit what you offer in terms of support if they were to come to you.
Oh, absolutely. So the medical system really is geared more towards treatment than prevention. And so it's not unheard of for someone to go to their doctor with concerns about their memory to be told that it's just a normal part of aging and not to worry. Then 5 or so years down the line, they get a diagnosis of dementia. The really sad thing is that they could actually have been taking action for those years to slow down the progression. And that's where I help people, as well as working with those who have a family history of Alzheimer's or dementia, or maybe people who have had a traumatic brain injury or concussion. And so I work with people as part of my program. I ask clients to go through some initial assessments. And again, that's to get a baseline, and so that we understand where their personal risks lie. And then we work together on a bespoke plan. So there's no point, in a sense, in me coming up with this lovely plan and they're kind of like, no, that just doesn't suit me. So we work together and we come up with a bespoke plan. And the assessments, as I mentioned, really help to identify the greatest areas of risk. And then we work together to reduce those risks. It's very tailored, and because the things, again, that increase the risk for me might be different to the things that increase the risk for somebody else. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I mean, wonderful work, as I said to you before. And what other sort of support do you think people could have around someone that someone needs when they're going through, come to terms with memory loss? What other kind of support do you think people need?
Okay, so are you saying if they have like a loved one and they're noticing these signs in them?
Absolutely. For them to be
Yeah.
open and transparent about their journey.
Yeah, I think the important thing is to recognize that they're not just trying to be difficult, and that actually to recognize those early warning signs and to support them, to listen to them, because it can be super isolating if people feel like they can't talk about some of the things that they're noticing in their own cognitive health. And then, in a sense, those 11 risks. So what are the things you can do to support them? How can you encourage them to get outside and get some exercise? Or how can you encourage to eat in a way that will really support their health? How can you encourage them to carry on learning or to remain socially active? What are the things that you can do to support them? Yeah.
Yeah. And you're doing the work as well. So if anyone out there who wants to begin treatment, Alison, please share your details.
Yeah. So again, I'd love to just reassure your listeners that if they or someone that they love feel a gradual loss of who they are, then I've got a message of hope. And that is that you can change your brain and make it better. And it would be a privilege to support you on that journey. So if you think you're heading in that direction, even the slightest bit, or afraid it could be hereditary, then please book a call with me by going to my website, which is alisonliucoaching.com, and I would love to connect with you.
Yeah, and it's Liu, Liu, Alison.
Yes, it is. Yes,
2 L's, isn't it, Alison? With
it
2
is.
L's.
Alison with 2 L's and then liucoaching.com.
Don't worry, listeners, all her details will be on the description of today's podcast. Any parting words for my listeners, Alison, before you go?
Oh, yeah, Caroline, it's been such a pleasure, and thank you so much. You're providing an amazing resource with the Crazy Over 40s Life podcast. I just love what you're doing in empowering women to take control of their health. I hope that this has been helpful for your listeners, that they feel encouraged and know that they can be empowered in looking after their health. I'm going to share your podcast with everybody in my network, and just thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much, Alison. It's been an amazing experience. I've learned so much from this conversation, and I'm sure my listeners will too. Take care, Alison.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Alison left her details. You want to get hold of all my guests? You can. Instagram, Facebook, Gmail, the crazyover40slife.com website. On this episode, we shall be finding out what is the key to communication. Diana Silva Franco, who's a professional journalist and a passionate communicator, says the key to communication will help you to share your vision and to generate positive advances in your life, communities, and your environment. She's here to share more on the Crazy Over 40s Live podcast on Thursday. And don't forget to share and subscribe so you can keep updated on all the episodes as and when they become available.